The emergency beacon's shrill wail cut through the humid air of Verdania's jungle canopy before dying with a pathetic electronic wheeze, leaving Captain Sarah Mitchell alone with the sound of alien birds and her own rapid breathing. Her shuttle lay crumpled against the massive trunk of a tree that could have housed a small city, its hull split open like an overripe fruit and its contents scattered across the forest floor. Sarah checked her suit's integrity readings and winced at the results. Life support would last maybe 18 hours, assuming she didn't exert herself too much. The comm array was completely fried, and her emergency transponder appeared to be broadcasting a signal that roughly translated to, "Please ignore this completely," in electronic terms. "Well," she muttered, climbing carefully out of the wreckage, "this is definitely not how diplomatic missions are supposed to go." She'd been en route to establish first contact protocols with the Sylvani, the indigenous species that inhabited Verdania's southern continent. 3 months of careful preparation, linguistic analysis, and cultural briefings, all reduced to emergency survival procedures in the span of 30 seconds. Sarah began salvaging what she could from the shuttle's emergency supplies, trying to focus on practical concerns rather than the growing certainty that the Aurora's dream wouldn't realize she was missing for at least 6 hours. The jungle around her pulsed with alien life, sounds and movements that suggested she was being observed by creatures that had never seen a human before. That's when she heard the footsteps. They were too heavy and too regular to belong to any of the native wildlife she'd studied in the mission briefings. Something large and intelligent was moving through the undergrowth with the kind of measured pace that suggested it wasn't afraid of anything it might encounter. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, then stopped as her diplomatic training kicked in. First contact protocols existed for good reasons, and drawing a weapon on an indigenous species member was a career-ending violation of about 17 different interstellar treaties. The footsteps stopped just outside her line of sight, and Sarah felt the peculiar sensation of being studied by an unseen intelligence. She continued sorting through her emergency supplies with deliberate calm, making no sudden movements while trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Human," a voice said in heavily accented standard, and Sarah looked up to find herself face to face with what could only be a Sylvani warrior. The alien woman was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Nearly 7 feet tall, with bronze-tinted skin marked by intricate ritual scarification, she moved with the fluid grace of a predator who had never encountered anything she couldn't kill. Her hair was a cascade of silver white that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and her features held an otherworldly beauty that was both familiar and utterly alien. But it was her ears that marked her unmistakably as Sylvani, long and pointed, extending well beyond human proportions and twitching slightly as they tracked sounds in the jungle around them. Those ears were currently focused entirely on Sarah, a fact that suggested she had the warrior's complete and undivided attention. The weapons in the Sylvani's hands hummed with barely contained energy, their crystalline components glowing with colors that had no names in any human language. Sarah recognized them from intelligence briefings as plasma rifles, capable of reducing a human to component atoms in roughly 2 seconds. "I am Zaratiel of the Moonhunter clan," the warrior continued, her voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested she was accustomed to being obeyed without question. "You trespass on sacred hunting grounds. Explain yourself before I decide whether your death will be swift or instructive." Sarah set down the emergency ration she'd been examining and straightened slowly, keeping her hands visible and away from any equipment that might be mistaken for weapons. Her diplomatic training had covered scenarios like this, though the theoretical discussions had seemed much less immediate when conducted in climate-controlled conference rooms. "I am Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Diplomatic Corps," she replied, matching Zaratiel's formal tone. "I was traveling to the southern continent to establish contact with your people when my shuttle experienced mechanical failure. I crash-landed here without intention to violate your territory." Zaratiel's eyes narrowed, and Sarah noticed they were an unusual shade of amber that seemed to shift and change in the filtered jungle light. "Lies. Humans do not travel alone to Sylvani territory. Where are your warriors? Your weapons? Your invasion force?" "I have no warriors, no invasion force, and only the standard defensive equipment required by regulations." Sarah gestured slowly toward her sidearm. One plasma pistol, which I have not drawn and do not intend to draw unless my life is directly threatened. The Sylvani warrior circled her slowly, never taking her eyes or weapons off Sarah. There was something predatory about the movement, but Sarah also noticed signs of exhaustion in the alien's posture. Her left arm held her rifle at a slightly awkward angle, and there were what appeared to be recent tears in her combat harness. "You speak strangely for a spy," Zaratiel observed. "Most intruders either beg for mercy or threaten retaliation. You do neither." Sarah considered her response carefully. "Would either approach be more effective in convincing you that I'm not a threat?" For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across Zaratiel's features. "No. But it would be more predictable." She paused in her circling, studying Sarah with renewed interest. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human." "In my experience, the two are often indistinguishable," Sarah replied. "Though I prefer to think of it as practical honesty. I'm stranded, injured, and completely at your mercy. Deception seems counterproductive under the circumstances." Zaratiel's grip on her weapons relaxed slightly, though they remained trained on Sarah. "Injured? You show no obvious wounds." Sarah carefully pulled back her uniform sleeve to reveal a gash across her forearm where a piece of shuttle debris had caught her during the crash. "Nothing life-threatening, but it needs attention if I'm going to avoid infection." The warrior's eyes fixed on the wound with what appeared to be professional interest. "You tend injuries calmly." "Most humans I have observed panic at the sight of their own blood." "Most humans you've observed?" Sarah asked, then immediately wondered if the question was wise. Zaratiel's expression darkened. "Intelligence gathering. Know your enemy, as the saying goes." She gestured with one of her rifles toward the deeper jungle. "Your people have been watching us for months. Did you think we would not notice?" Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "The orbital surveys. You've been tracking our reconnaissance missions." "Obviously. The question is whether you are part of the advance force or merely an unlucky scout." Zaratiel's weapons rose again, their energy readings climbing toward lethal levels. "Choose your next words carefully, human. They may be your last." Sarah took a slow breath, meeting Zaratiel's amber gaze without flinching. Her diplomatic training had included scenarios far more comfortable than this, but the core principles remained the same. De-escalation through honesty and respect. "I choose the truth," Sarah said quietly. "I am neither advance force nor scout. I am a diplomat whose mission was to establish peaceful contact with your people. My ship, the Aurora's Dream, carries a full diplomatic team and no weapons beyond standard defensive systems. We came here hoping to learn about your culture and find common ground between our species." Zaratiel's pointed ears twitched, a micro-expression Sarah couldn't interpret. "Diplomats. Your people send talkers instead of warriors." There was something in her tone that might have been contempt or possibly confusion. "We've found that talking generally produces better results than shooting," Sarah replied. "Though I admit the approach has its limitations when dealing with mechanical failures and hostile reception committees." The warrior's lips quirked slightly. "Hostile reception committees. Is that what your people call proper border security?" "That depends." "Is threatening to vaporize crash survivors part of your standard greeting protocol?" Zaratiel actually smiled at that, revealing teeth that were slightly sharper than human normal. "Only on days ending in day, as you humans might say." She lowered her weapons fractionally. "You have an interesting approach to mortal peril, diplomat Sarah Mitchell. Experience has taught me that panic rarely improves dangerous situations." Sarah gestured toward her scattered supplies. "Would you object if I continued sorting through my emergency equipment? Some of it might be useful for establishing communication with my ship." "Proceed. But slowly." Zaratiel settled into a crouch that somehow managed to be both relaxed and ready for instant action. "Tell me about this peaceful contact you mention." Your reconnaissance missions have been observing our military installations and resource deposits. This does not suggest peaceful intentions. Sarah paused in her inventory of medical supplies. We've been conducting standard orbital surveys to understand your civilization's technological level and distribution patterns. The goal was to avoid accidentally violating cultural taboos or territorial boundaries during initial contact. By spying on us from orbit for 3 months. By gathering basic information that would prevent exactly the kind of misunderstanding we're having right now. Sarah held up a field medical scanner. For instance, our surveys indicated that Sylvani settlements were concentrated in the southern continent. If I'd known that these northern regions were sacred hunting grounds, would have programmed my emergency landing protocols to avoid them. Zaratiel studied the medical device with obvious interest. Your technology is more advanced than our initial assessments suggested. That scanner operates on quantum resonance principles that we have not yet mastered. You're familiar with quantum resonance? Enough to recognize it. Zaratiel's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps there is more to discuss than I initially believed. Your people clearly possess scientific knowledge that could benefit the Sylvani. Sarah activated the scanner and began examining her injured arm. Scientific exchange has always been one of the primary goals of first contact protocols. Knowledge shared between civilizations tends to benefit everyone involved. An optimistic perspective. Zaratiel watched as Sarah cleaned and bandaged her wound with professional efficiency. You tend injuries well for a diplomat. Cross-training requirement. Diplomats sometimes work in dangerous environments. Sarah noticed that Zaratiel was favoring her left side. Speaking of injuries, you appear to be hurt yourself. The warrior's posture immediately became more defensive. Sylvani warriors do not require assistance with minor injuries. I wasn't offering assistance, just making an observation. Sarah sealed the medical kit and moved on to her communication equipment. Though if you change your mind, human medical technology is quite effective on humanoid physiology. Zaratiel was quiet for several minutes, watching Sarah attempt to jury-rig a working comm unit from the wreckage of her shuttle systems. Finally, she spoke. The injury is from recent combat. My clan disagreed with certain tactical decisions made by our leadership. Disagreed strongly enough to result in injury. Disagreed strongly enough to result in my temporary exile from clan territory. Zaratiel's tone carried bitter amusement. I am as displaced as you are, diplomat Sarah Mitchell, though for different reasons. Sarah looked up from her work. What kind of tactical decisions? The kind that involve attacking peaceful settlements to prove our strength to potential allies. Zaratiel's jaw tightened. The kind that transform honorable warriors into raiders and murderers. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the jungle's evening temperature. Your clan wanted to attack non-combatants. Not my clan specifically. The Moonhunter clan was recruited by the Warfire Coalition, a group of clans that believes showing aggression toward weaker neighbors will demonstrate our strength to your people when contact finally occurs. They wanted to impress humans by attacking innocent Sylvani. The logic was that humans would respect strength and fear weakness. By demonstrating our willingness to use violence, we would negotiate from a position of power. Zaratiel's disgust was evident. I pointed out that attacking defenseless civilians might demonstrate ruthlessness, but it would hardly prove our military capabilities against a spacefaring civilization. Sarah sat back on her heels, pieces of a larger political picture clicking into place. So you refuse to participate? I refuse to slaughter farmers and artisans to satisfy the coalition's paranoid fantasies about human psychology. Zaratiel winced as she shifted position. My refusal was interpreted as cowardice by some, and treason by others. Hence the injury and the exile. Hence my current status as a warrior without a clan, in territory I am not supposed to enter, encountering the very humans my former allies are so concerned about impressing. Sarah couldn't help but smile. The irony is fairly spectacular. Is it? Zaratiel tilted her head, her pointed ears shifting forward with what Sarah was beginning to recognize as curiosity. "You refuse to attack innocent people to impress my species, and now you're the first Sylvani to actually meet one of us. Instead of a violent demonstration, you're having a reasonable conversation with someone whose job it is to establish peaceful relations." Zaratiel considered this. "A reasonable conversation that began with me threatening to kill you, but which has progressed to discussing the philosophical implications of interspecies diplomacy," Sarah pointed out. "I'd call that progress." "You have an unusual definition of progress, diplomat." Sarah grinned. "It served me well so far. Though I admit this is the first time I've conducted negotiations while stranded in an alien jungle with someone who could vaporize me without breaking a sweat." "The day is young," Zaratiel replied solemnly. "There is still time for vaporization if our negotiations go poorly." Sarah blinked, then realized the warrior was joking. "Your sense of humor is remarkably similar to human sarcasm. Perhaps our species have more in common than either of us expected." Zaratiel paused. "You mentioned establishing communication with your ship. How long before they realize you are missing?" Sarah checked her chronometer. "Approximately 4 hours. They'll begin search and rescue operations immediately, but this jungle will make detection difficult." 4 hours. Zaratiel seemed to come to some internal decision. "That should be sufficient time to determine whether you are truly the peaceful diplomat you claim to be, or something more dangerous in disguise. And how do you propose to make that determination?" Zaratiel's smile was sharp and predatory. "By seeing how you react when the rest of my story becomes relevant to our current situation." "The rest of your story?" Sarah asked, though something in Zaratiel's tone suggested she might not want to hear the answer. "The Warfire Coalition did not accept my refusal gracefully. They declared me a traitor and sent hunting parties to ensure I could not share their plans with potential human contacts." Zaratiel gestured toward the deeper jungle. "Those hunting parties are currently searching this region. They will find us within the next few hours." Sarah felt her diplomatic optimism take a significant hit. "How many hunters?" 3 separate groups of 4 warriors each. All armed with military-grade weapons and orders to eliminate both of us on sight." Zaratiel's ears swiveled as she tracked sounds in the forest. "Your crash landing sent up enough electromagnetic interference to mask our heat signatures temporarily, but that advantage will not last long. So we need to either repair my communication equipment quickly enough to call for extraction, or find somewhere to hide until my people locate me through other means. Or we could fight." Zaratiel's weapons hummed as she checked their energy levels. Though 12 trained warriors against 1 injured exile and 1 diplomat suggests poor odds for survival. Sarah looked up from her makeshift comm unit. "You're including me in that tactical assessment. You are armed, and you have not retreated despite obvious danger. These facts suggest either courage or stupidity, both of which can be useful in combat." "I prefer to think of it as practical problem-solving," Sarah replied, returning to her work on the communication array. "Fighting 12 warriors seems less practical than avoiding them entirely." Spoken like a true diplomat. Zaratiel moved closer to examine Sarah's improvised repairs. "Your approach to electronics is creative." Sarah had been attempting to bypass the shuttle's destroyed main communications array by connecting her personal comm unit to the emergency beacon's power source through a jury-rigged quantum field generator. The result looked like something assembled by an optimistic child with access to high-energy physics. "Creative is one word for it," Sarah admitted. "Desperate would be another." "May I?" Zaratiel indicated the makeshift device. Sarah gestured for her to proceed, curious about Sylvani technical knowledge. Zaratiel placed her hands on the quantum field generator, and immediately the device's output stabilized and strengthened. "How did you do that?" "Sylvani technology operates on bioquantum principles. Our nervous systems can interface directly with quantum field matrices." Zaratiel's brow furrowed in concentration. "Your people build impressive devices, but you operate them externally. We become part of the system. The communication unit flickered to life, displaying signal strength readings that had previously been completely absent. Sarah stared at the sudden functionality with professional amazement. That's remarkable. The applications for bioquantum interface technology could revolutionize human electronics. And your external manipulation techniques could allow us to build much more complex systems than our direct interface methods permit. Zaratil smiled. Perhaps there is merit to this peaceful exchange concept. Sarah activated the comm unit and immediately heard the familiar crackle of her ship's emergency frequency. Aurora's dream, this is Captain Mitchell. Emergency beacon active, requesting immediate extraction. Static filled the channel for several seconds before a familiar voice responded. Sarah. Thank God. We've been trying to locate your shuttle for the past 2 hours. Are you injured? Minor injuries only. But I have important information about local political situations that requires immediate command briefing. Sarah glanced at Zaratil. Also, I have a potential diplomatic contact who may require emergency asylum. Asylum? It's complicated. How soon can you reach my position? We're tracking your signal now. Estimate 40 minutes for shuttle extraction. Sarah felt relief wash over her, then immediately remembered their more pressing problem. Zaratil, will 40 minutes be enough time? The warrior's ears had been tracking sounds throughout their conversation. Now they flattened against her head in obvious alarm. No. The hunting parties have found our electromagnetic signature. They will be here in less than 10 minutes. Sarah keyed her comm again. Aurora's dream, we have hostile contacts approaching. Military-level threat, estimated arrival in 10 minutes. Sarah, get to cover and wait for extraction. Do not engage. Understood. Sarah looked at Zaratil. Any suggestions for defensive positions? Your shuttle's hull will provide some protection from energy weapons, but not for long. Zaratil was already moving toward what remained of the cargo bay. We need to make them cautious about approaching directly. They quickly repositioned Sarah's salvaged equipment behind the most intact section of the shuttle's hull. Zaratil's military experience became evident as she evaluated sight lines and escape routes with professional efficiency. Your weapons training? She asked Sarah. Basic proficiency with plasma pistols. I'm certified for defensive use, but I've never actually shot anyone. Aim for center mass, remember that energy weapons have no recoil, and try not to hesitate when the moment comes. Zaratil handed Sarah one of her rifles. This has significantly more stopping power than your sidearm. Sarah accepted the weapon, noting its organic feel and the way it seemed to warm under her touch. I thought Sylvani weapons required bioquantum interface. They do. But your nervous system is compatible enough for basic operation. Zaratil grinned. Another point in favor of peaceful cooperation between our species. The sound of approaching footsteps made further conversation impossible. Sarah counted at least 8 different movement patterns, suggesting that multiple hunting groups had converged on their position. Zaratil of the Moonhunter clan, a voice called from the forest. You are ordered to surrender yourself for judgment. The human will be eliminated as a security threat. Counter-proposal, Zaratil called back. You withdraw from this region and we pretend this encounter never happened. Harsh laughter echoed from multiple positions. The traitor has found her courage again. Unfortunately, courage will not protect you from coalition justice. Zaratil looked at Sarah. Last chance to reconsider the fighting option. Sarah checked the charge level on her borrowed rifle and settled into a defensive position. I've always believed that standing up to bullies is a moral imperative, regardless of species. Even when the bullies have superior numbers and firepower. Especially then. Sarah's diplomatic smile took on a distinctly predatory edge. Besides, they're threatening to kill an unarmed diplomat. My people take a very dim view of that sort of behavior. Zaratil's answering grin showed all of her sharp teeth. Diplomat Sarah Mitchell, I believe this partnership may prove more formidable than either of us anticipated. The first energy blast vaporized a section of hull 3 meters from their position, and Sarah discovered that theoretical weapons training translated surprisingly well to practical application when survival was at stake. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes, though Sarah would have sworn it continued for hours. Zaratiel fought with the fluid precision of a born warrior, using the jungle terrain and the shuttle's wreckage to outmaneuver opponents who had expected a quick execution rather than a pitched battle. Sarah discovered that her diplomatic training in reading micro-expressions and predicting behavior translated surprisingly well to combat tactics, allowing her to anticipate enemy movements and coordinate with Zaratiel despite never having fought alongside an alien before. By the time the Aurora's Dream shuttle appeared overhead, for Sylvani warriors lay unconscious, 3 had retreated into the deeper jungle, and the remainder were maintaining a cautious distance while calling for reinforcements. Well, Sarah panted, checking the charge level on her borrowed rifle, that could have gone worse. You fight well for a diplomat, Zaratiel observed, binding a minor wound on her shoulder with practiced efficiency. Your people's tactical training is more comprehensive than our intelligence suggested. Your people's intelligence gathering needs work if you thought diplomats would be completely helpless in combat situations. The extraction shuttle settled into the small clearing with the kind of precision that spoke of excellent piloting and even better sensor technology. Sarah's relief at seeing familiar faces was tempered by the realization that her rescue had just become significantly more complicated. Commander Torres emerged from the shuttle with a full security detail, his expression cycling through relief, confusion, and professional concern as he took in the scene of recent combat. Sarah, are you injured? Minor wounds only. Commander, I need to introduce you to Zaratiel of the Moonhunter clan. She provided crucial assistance during the engagement and has requested political asylum. Torres studied the tall Sylvani warrior with the kind of careful attention that career military officers reserved for unknown quantities. Ms. Zaratiel, I understand you've been helpful to Captain Mitchell. However, granting asylum to alien nationals requires approval from levels well above my authority. Commander, Zaratiel said in carefully measured standard, I possess intelligence regarding planned attacks against human diplomatic missions. This information may be vital to preventing armed conflict between our species. Sarah watched Torres weigh the implications of that statement against the political complexity of harboring an alien refugee. What kind of planned attacks? The Warfire Coalition intends to launch preemptive strikes against human vessels to demonstrate Sylvani military capabilities before formal first contact occurs. They believe your people will respect strength and fear weakness. How imminent are these attacks? Zaratiel's ears flattened slightly. The first strike was scheduled to occur during your people's next diplomatic mission to the southern continent. Approximately 1 week from now. Torres keyed his calm immediately. Aurora's Dream, this is Commander Torres. Priority Alpha communication with Captain Rodriguez. We have actionable intelligence regarding threats to Operation Peaceful Dawn. While Torres coordinated with the ship, Sarah found herself alone with Zaratiel for the first time since their extraction began. The warrior was studying the human shuttle with obvious interest, her gaze lingering on the advanced sensor arrays and communication equipment. Second thoughts about asylum? Sarah asked. No. But I am realizing that my choice to trust you may have implications beyond my own survival. Zaratiel's expression was thoughtful. Your people's technology is far more advanced than coalition intelligence suggested. The planned attacks would not demonstrate Sylvani strength, they would provoke retaliation that could destroy entire clans. That's why diplomatic contact exists, Sarah pointed out. To prevent exactly those kinds of misunderstandings. And yet your first diplomatic contact involved combat against hostile forces. Zaratiel's smile was wry. Perhaps the coalition's assumptions about your people's nature were not entirely incorrect. Sarah considered this. We fought because they threatened to kill us both without attempting communication or negotiation. That's self-defense, not aggression. A distinction that may be lost on coalition leadership when they receive reports about this engagement. Torres returned before Sarah could respond, his expression grim. Ms. Zaratil, Captain Rodriguez has authorized temporary asylum pending full diplomatic review. You'll be granted quarters aboard the Aurora's Dream and access to our legal counsel. And in exchange, complete intelligence briefing regarding coalition plans, assistance with identifying moderate Silvani factions who might support peaceful contact, and your cooperation in establishing communication channels that could prevent the armed conflict you've described. Zaratil nodded slowly. Acceptable terms. As they boarded the shuttle for extraction, Sarah found herself reflecting on how dramatically her simple diplomatic mission had evolved. She'd crash-landed expecting to study alien culture from a safe distance and ended up fighting alongside a warrior who might be the key to preventing an interstellar war. Sarah, Zaratil said quietly as the shuttle lifted off, there is something I should mention about our engagement with the hunting parties. What's that? Your calm response under pressure, your willingness to fight when necessary but preference for negotiation when possible, these traits are highly valued in Silvani warrior culture. The hunters who escaped will report that you displayed what we call centered strength. Sarah frowned. Is that good or bad? It means that when word of this encounter reaches coalition leadership, they will reconsider their assumptions about human psychology and combat capabilities. Zaratil's amber eyes glinted with what might have been satisfaction. Your diplomatic approach may have accomplished more in 18 minutes of combat than months of traditional negotiation could have achieved. How so? Because now they know that humans can be reasoned with, but cannot be intimidated. That you prefer peace but are willing to fight when necessary. That you will protect allies even at personal risk. Zaratil leaned back in her seat as Verdania's surface fell away below them. These are the qualities that Silvani respect above all others. Sarah realized that her crash landing had inadvertently become the most successful first contact mission in diplomatic history. So what happens now? Now the real negotiations begin. But this time, we begin from a position of mutual respect rather than mutual suspicion. Zaratil smiled. I suspect your peaceful contact protocols may prove more effective than anyone anticipated. As the Aurora's Dream grew larger in the shuttle's viewport, Sarah reflected on the strange path that had led from mechanical failure to interstellar diplomacy. She'd started the day as a simple xenoarchaeologist and ended it as the architect of an alliance that might reshape relations between two civilizations. Zaratil, she said, I think this is going to be the beginning of something remarkable. Indeed, diplomat Sarah Mitchell. Though I recommend you request hazard pay for future diplomatic missions. Sarah laughed, realizing that despite the danger, combat, and political complexity, she'd found exactly what she'd been looking for, common ground with an alien species, and perhaps the foundation for lasting peace between their peoples. Sometimes, she reflected, the best diplomacy happened when you stopped trying to be diplomatic and simply tried to be human.